Hi, everyone. Jeff Toyster here, and I'm really excited to be joined by my guest today, Kristi Thompson, and she is a culture specialist at Help Scout, which for someone who's obsessed with culture, I'm excited to talk to her a little bit about that. Our particular conversation today is about something called whole company support. And I'm going to let Kristi explain what that is in just a moment. But first, Kristi, how are you today? Thanks for joining me.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm excited to talk to you about whole company support. When I've researched companies that are really customer focused, this is something that comes up many times, and I've seen many companies do this. And our goal today is hopefully to show listeners how to implement some version of whole company support in their own organization. So for starters, can you explain to people that are listening or watching, what is whole company support?
Sure. So, whole company support, also known as all hands support, basically gets everyone in the whole company talking to customers. So, that could look different from business to business, but often it means everybody from the CEO to designers and engineers are spending some time in the email queue answering customer questions.
And just to clarify, the way Help Scout primarily supports customers is via email. Is that correct?
Yeah, we offer email and live chat support, but
Okay.
yeah, email I would say is most of our interactions.
And do people outside the customer support team, do they get involved in live chat or do they stick to email?
Usually I encourage people to do email because live chat, you kind of never know what you're going to get. And it's kind of like you're expected to answer rapid fire. So we do have a couple people who are really seasoned. For example, our CEO, when he does whole company support, he knows the product like the back of his hand and he loves live chat. So often he'll do live chat instead of email. But 99% of the people who are doing whole company support do email. And that way they can take their time and look through the emails and pick a question that they feel comfortable with.
Which is kind of nice, right? Because you could always, if you're not sure, you can get help or you can rewrite it. Live chat, you're on the spot. If it goes south, it's
Yeah,
going
live
south
chat
in a
makes me
hurry.
nervous sometimes. So, yeah, definitely email can feel a little more user friendly to people who are new to talking to customers.
So this is a side question though, but if uh, your CEO is doing live chat and someone's really angry and says, "I want to talk to your boss," and he's like, "I'm Nick. This is me." Does that ever happen to him?
I have seen that happen both in email and in live chat, and it's very satisfying. I think probably for us because it's kind of amusing, but also for the customer of like, wow, I really am talking to one of the founders. Like I really am being heard, and my opinion is valued, and so I think it's very satisfying for customers.
I've worked in a company before where we offered whole company support as well, and it was phone support. And so sometimes they would get me as the customer service manager, and sometimes they'd get the president of the company who was the owner on the phone, and it was that same type of reaction, like, really, is this no, who's your boss?
Right. Yeah.
So what are some of the benefits? Like, why would a company have people outside the normal support team answering emails or chatting with customers?
That's a good question because, for example, we're not inviting support people to go try the designer's job for a day. That would not be a good thing. But I do think it's really valuable for everyone in the company to do some support. And I think there's probably four main benefits for the business. So the first is that it keeps the company or the customer at the center of everything we do as a company. When you're talking to customers and you're hearing about their pain points and what makes them happy, that's on the forefront of everyone's minds. And it's driving all the decisions we're making about the product. The second benefit is that it deepens our team's understanding of our products. So we're fortunate at Help Scout, our software is customer support software. So we're all using our own software to help our customers and answer their questions about our software. So that's just like icing on the cake for our team. And it gives everyone the opportunity to learn more about our tools. But even if a business didn't have that benefit of using their own software, still everyone who's participating is learning more about their products and how their customers feel about it. And the third benefit is that it helps us build a better product. It shortens the feedback loop. I think of the game of telephone where kids line up and someone starts whispering a message, and by the time it makes it to the end of the line, the message is totally lost in translation. And I think sometimes that can happen with customer feedback. But when we have designers and people on the product team and engineers all talking directly to customers, they're hearing that feedback firsthand, which I think is so valuable. And then the fourth benefit is that it strengthens our team as a whole, across the whole company. Um, I think when engineers are building a project or a product for customers that they've talked to, real live people, I think that makes their work more rewarding. And it also gives all of us opportunities to collaborate and communicate across teams. So I think those are the big four benefits in my mind for the business. And then there's also a secret bonus benefit for the support team, which I don't necessarily announce to the other teams. But the truth is that historically, support teams tend to be the lowest paid team in a company and maybe aren't necessarily valued or respected. But when you have people from the whole company seeing your work, participating in it, they'll value it and they'll want to hear what you have to say. So that's kind of like the secret bonus for the support team that I think it helps people value the work that we do even more.
I want to talk about that secret bonus one. Now that we're recording the secret bonus, right?
The secret's out.
It's out there. But I wanted to know, do you ever get pushback about whole company support, or do you find that people are resentful about, having to support customers? Or do you really find that it's an opportunity, like you said, for people to understand customers better, and do they enjoy it? Like, what's been the experience or the feedback you've gotten?
Sure, yeah. The way I pitch it to people is that, if they're feeling nervous about talking to customers or if they feel like they don't know the product well enough, I feel like it's worth leaning into. And I compare it to going to the gym. Like usually, or at least in my experience, I don't feel excited to go to the gym and it's hard, but it's always worth it. And I'm always glad I went after the fact. And generally, the feedback I've gotten from people is like, wow, I thought this was going to be hard or scary, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. And now I can see why we do this and why it's so valuable. And, people will share new things they've learned about the product, or they'll be able to quickly act on feedback they got. For example, one time a designer was doing whole company support, and she saw customer feedback about a shade of blue we were using on our website that was not very accessible. And she was able to really quickly get that changed to a different shade of blue. So things like that, just overall, even if the growing pains can feel challenging to lean into this new challenge, people always seem to find that it's worth it.
I love that example about the designer just understanding the shade of blue, because in my experience, it's one thing to have a persona or some data. It's another to have a real conversation and really be able to step into that customer's shoes. And it was one of the benefits I think you talked about earlier. Do you find that happens often, where someone will get feedback directly from a customer, and then that's the light bulb moment where maybe there was survey data or data before that was accessible, but it was talking to a customer that spurred them into action?
Yeah, interestingly, I've had some conversations recently with engineers who have experienced this. So something that I am currently working on figuring out with them is making whole company support for engineers a little more flexible. So for example, if an engineer sees feedback about maybe a small bug that a lot of people aren't reporting, but it's painful for the people who are writing in about it, or maybe just a small tweak that wouldn't take a lot of time to make, but it would be like a really nice win for customers. It'd be so cool if they could spend some of their whole company support shift just banging out that code. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but a few engineers have expressed interest in doing that kind of thing. So I would love, every person is bringing different skills and strengths to the table when they're participating in whole company support. So I would love to just continue making room for whole company support to be like flexible and fluid and just take advantage of those different strengths.
And I think that really makes sense to me. I remember a story from a client I was working with where there was a billing problem that kept happening, and it made no sense. The support rep would fix it, and then it would happen again. And it turned out to be a very specific set of circumstances and one wonky line of code, but it took the right person to say, hey, this shouldn't work this way. They fixed the code and they realized the problem affected a small group of customers, but it was still costing them 50 grand a year. So
Wow.
code, 50 grand a year, I'm going to lunch.
Yeah, that's a huge win.
So I wonder though, because you mentioned flexibility, and I think for people that might be watching or listening in, they might be asking themselves, how do I implement this? I mean, you must have some structure around how do you get people involved? What kind of support you give them to support customers? Now, how do you do that?
Yeah, good question. I try to have a good balance of structure so that people feel like they have the support they need, but then also flexibility so that people feel like they have the trust and the autonomy they need to not be stressed out. I don't want people to feel like this is just one more thing on their plate. So the way we do it at Help Scout is when someone is newly hired, we create some to-do list items on a Trello checklist. And that just walks them through the product and some common customer questions just to get them starting to be more familiar with the kind
And
of
sorry
interaction.
to jump in, but what is a Trello checklist for people that might not be familiar with that?
Oh, sure. So Trello is a product management or task management software. Um, it's just basically checklists on steroids.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So they go through their checklist and learn more about the product. And then they get a buddy on the support team. And we go through and look through customer emails and we find some questions that we feel like will be approachable. And we'll leave an internal note on the conversation with a hint for how they can find more information to answer the question or talk about maybe, oh yeah, this is a feature request we've been tracking. Here's where you can see our feature requests. So we use that as a training opportunity. So they'll do that for a couple days with us. And then after that, we set up a recurring whole company support shift. And this is where I try to be really flexible because I know everybody's schedule is different and everyone has different responsibilities. So some people choose to do one whole day a month. Some people choose to do 1 hour every other week. I personally don't care. To me, the point is for people to be talking to customers and learning more about the product. So to me, I'm not into quotas of hours spent or emails sent or that kind of thing. And then when you're doing your whole company support recurring shifts, I have levels of progression. So the first level, level A, is people who are new hires and they're still just getting used to the product and learning how to talk to customers. So our support team tries to make sure we focus the most on giving them support. So we'll continue to leave them hints and they'll drop a link to a conversation they're working on into Slack. So Slack is the software we use to communicate because we're a remote company. So we're not sitting in cubicles next to each other. So we're always typing to each other. So people can drop a link to a conversation into Slack and then we can review what they've written and give them feedback and let them know if there's anything they need to tweak or give them the thumbs up to go ahead and send their reply. And then after a few weeks or a few months, depending on the person, the goal is to move towards level B. And that's where the support team's still totally available to review your drafts or point you in the right direction. But at that point, we don't leave you hints. It's up to you to go through the queue and find conversations that are interesting to you or questions that you feel like you can answer.
Now, do you plan for uh, people who are outside the support team in your staffing model, or if they're answering emails, is that just kind of gravy that day?
What do you mean by that? Can you expand on that question?
Well, in other words, you're staffing to how many emails or live chats that you might have to respond to, and you have your core support team. You probably know what they're capable of, but then now you have people from other departments that are joining in at different times. Do you count on them in terms of this is how many emails we can knock out today, or is that just kind of extra or bonus?
I see what you mean. Yeah, right now we just think of it as gravy or bonus. And I think like in an ideal world, whole company support would be so effective that potentially those people could like replace needing another person on the support team. But that's at least not where we are at Help Scout right now. I just think of it more of like it's time for those participants to be learning and there's no pressure on how much they get done. So yeah, it's definitely, we don't factor it into like, oh, phew, we won't have to do as much today as the support team because we have so much help. Because in a way, it takes a lot of help and infrastructure from the support team to not only be helping our customers, but also supporting the whole company support participants. So we've found it's really helpful to have a point person kind of overseeing whole company support and the scheduling of the shifts and making sure they have support when they need draft reviews. So that's my role. And that just helps it go smoothly. And that way the support team has enough bandwidth to continue caring for customers while we're also caring for our teammates who are helping in the queue.
Gotcha. And that makes a lot of sense. And I like how it's positioned as something that's really designed to get other people in other departments to connect with customers and not something just to save a couple of bucks on staffing or because you're right, the way you're describing it, it's potentially resource intensive, I guess, if you're not careful. And so I wonder if, for companies thinking about implementing that, are there things that you've learned so that it doesn't take away from the support team's ability to help customers if you're helping your internal staff answer those tickets?
Yeah, that's a good point. In some ways, it would just be easier for the support team to not do this and just focus on answering customer questions. Um, for us, it's more about it's worth the effort because of all the benefits that it brings to everyone, and it makes everyone better at their job. And it's not so much about having help in the queue. For people who are thinking about implementing whole company support, I think there's two good questions to ask yourself to make sure your business and your team is ready. The first question is, does my company value the support team? Because if the leadership and other people in the company don't value what your support team does, it will be very difficult to get whole company support up and running, because you won't just be running up against logistics, which are hard enough, but you'll also be going up against values. So I think the best place to start at that point would be thinking about how you can gradually reshape how your company sees the support team. And then the second question to ask would be, is my support team successful? Do you have interpersonal drama? Do you have enough internal? And are they meeting basic standards and metrics? If they're not successful, then they're probably not ready to mentor other people in the company. So I think if you're feeling good in those two areas, then you're in a good place to start thinking about whole company support.
So we have time for just one more question, and I wanted to actually ask you about a follow-up to what you just said about the support team. Uh, what's been the reaction from the support team? Have they enjoyed collaborating with people from other departments? Do they sometimes feel like, oh, you're kind of getting in the way, move over, I have work to do, or a little bit of both, something else?
Yeah, we don't require that the whole team participates. So it's kind of like a project that you can choose to be a part of. And one way we try to make it not feel like too much of a burden on any one person is by encouraging people to use that Slack channel we set up. And by making it a public place, then anyone who wants to on the support team can help review drafts and give feedback. So if I'm having a bad day or I'm stressed and I'm just not up for it, then someone else can help out. So I think that helps. And that way I'm not handling a bunch of direct messages all by myself. And then also by keeping it public, Bob might have a question on Tuesday and Melanie might have the same question a week later, and then she can find that archived in Slack. So that's helpful. But overall, yeah, making it an optional thing. Again, I try to keep it all feeling very flexible and fluid. And I try to seek out feedback not only from participants, but also from people on my team, because as the company grows, we have to keep tweaking and figuring out what's a good fit, not just for the people who are participating, but also for our support team, because it needs to be sustainable for us, just like it needs to be sustainable for everyone else who's participating.
Well, Kristi, I'm sad our time is up. You've given such awesome information, and I think people who are tuning in are going to get some really valuable takeaways that they can implement. So thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your time, Jeff. I'm so glad we got to talk about whole company support today.